Next, we'll move on to Senate Bill, thank you, Patrick, Senate Bill 991. Before we do that, I'm looking for a motion to indefinitely postpone Senate Bill 991 and bring before the committee Senate Bills. Move before the committee Senate Bill 991, Substitute A. Motion made by Senator Sosnowski, seconded by Senator Paolino. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We have Senate 991 before us. This bill is associated with Rhode Island Public Transit Authority. Authority created, composition terms, oath officers, quorum, conflicts of interest. Senate President Ruggerio, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. While the original Bill S-991 would have placed much of Ripta's operation under the auspices of RIDOT, the Sub-A is much narrower in scope. The Sub-A simply provides that the Director of the Department of Transportation shall serve as the Chairman of the Board of Ripta. While I believe that Ripta should oversee all transportation matters in our state, including public transit, this is an important step towards the alignment of all our transportation goals: effective procurement, efficient use of federal funds, and moving our public transportation agency forward. And Mr. Chairman, I'll move passage of this, and I'll take any questions that any of the members might have.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do have a few folks signed up to testify, but we will come back to that in a minute if we could. Any questions for the Senate President? So just a commentary for those who are coming up to testify. I am asking you to testify on the Sub-A. As the Senate President indicates, it changes the members of the board to 9 from 8 and identifies the Director of the Department of Transportation as the chairperson for the board, and says 5 members will constitute a quorum, and it'll take effect July 1st. So if you're looking, Senator Sosnowski.
Thank you. I do have a question for the sponsor, Mr. Chairman. I definitely will support this legislation, Mr. President. My question was, will the Director of RIDOT, will he get additional salary for this, or will he serve on a voluntary basis?
I believe he'll be serving in the same capacity that he's serving without any extra compensation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, President. First up, I'll bring up, as I indicated, we're going to be talking on the Sub-A, not the original bill. First up, Barry Schaller from Rhode Island Transit, writers in opposition, and Greg Garrett representing himself in opposition. Greg? If I can ask you to keep your commentary 2 to 3 minutes, I appreciate it.
Good evening, committee. I've been before you before, so maybe you remember. My name is Barry Schaller. I've been a lifelong transit rider, transit advocate, and I was on the board of directors of Ripta in the 1990s. And I understand the appeal of a strong agency like RIDOT being able to get things done and coordinating all transportation. But I still feel, and our Ripta Riders group feels, Rhode Island Transit Riders group feels that this is still ill-advised anyway, even though it might be well-intentioned. Here's why. First of all, transit is a people service-oriented thing. And it's very important that they get feedback from the public, especially the riders. And Ripta does a good job of reaching out when they have policy changes. And I'm proud to say that when I was a board member, we established then the public comment at every board meeting. And that has continued long after I left the board. In contrast, RIDOT has no mechanism for public input. And the current leader of RIDOT has actually canceled the informal quarterly roundtables. You've heard about this before in his confirmation hearing, that the previous 3 administrations, their directors all met quarterly with community groups and the Environment Council of Rhode Island. That's disappeared. And my judgment is that although the current director isn't that he's a bad guy, he's done a good job, I think, of repairing the roads and bridges. But he's not a transit guy, and he's not interested, as far as I could tell, in communicating with transit users. The public input part of this is troubling. If this bill passes, I have we can't be assured that the public will be welcome at board meetings or even
Barry, if
allowed to comment at
if
board meetings.
if I could, I apologize to interrupt you. We're talking about the sub-A, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Which is
That
just-
that puts it as, that person as chair.
Okay.
And that person is
Just
the
wanna
one
make sure-
who coordinates and listens to and calls on public comment. The second reason this is, I think, ill-advised is inherently, RIDOT is a highway agency. Most of their budget, most of their staff, and the directors have had highway backgrounds. They're not transit people. And the actual RIDOT record on bus transit is not very positive. They proposed, without consulting riders, they proposed breaking up the central bus hub in Providence and scattering the buses. They value engineered out passenger amenities at the Pawtucket Central Falls Station that was supposed to replace the downtown Pawtucket bus hub. Fortunately, my opinion at least, the governor has intervened and the multi-hub is off the table and they're getting facilities in Pawtucket Central Falls, but no thanks to RIDOT. Now, when I was on the board, the chair had a lot to do with setting the agenda, and the chair was called upon to be a spokesperson for the agency and for transit in general. And I just can't see how you could feel that a highway person in a mostly highway agency should be the person called on to speak for transit and the Ripta agency. It's just not the appropriate person. I think it's absolutely appropriate that RIDOT director be an ex officio member. Their expertise on transportation and their knowledge of the federal regulations is valuable, but they shouldn't be the spokesperson for transit. What we should have is what we do ask the legislature to do, is to really address RIPTA's fundamental problem, which is to help build a culture of using transit and funding it so people will want to use it. You all know about the fiscal cliff and the decline of the gas tax. That's what we need, we don't need this bill. It accomplishes nothing that helps transit. What we need is the energy into working together to really build a first-class transit system. Thank you.
Barry, thank you very much. Questions for Barry? Thank you. Greg, over to you.
Yes. My name is Greg Garrett. I represent myself. I am a lifelong transit rider. I grew up in New York City. I do ride the buses here in Rhode Island. I have always found that the Department of Transportation focuses on roads, cars, and that they have paid almost no attention to public transit. In fact, and they have actually been actively working against bicycles and pedestrians. As a full-time pedestrian, I really worry about pedestrian safety. So putting these agencies together, even if we're not formally merging RIPTA into RIDOT, putting the chair of the Department of Transportation as the chair of RIPTA means that RIPTA is going to be having people who are running RIPTA who do not really care about transit, do not care about transit riders, do not care about talking to transit riders. I mean, the fact that RIPTA has an exceptionally good, at least for Rhode Island, public interface. When there's something going on at RIPTA, there's hearings all the time. I mean, I've testified in public hearings about RIPTA stuff at least 25, 30 times over the last 10 years. I mean, this is very, very important. So you're getting somebody who, you know, has major responsibilities for building roads, repairing roads, taking care of bridges. Putting them in charge of RIPTA is going to mean that RIPTA is basically going to be like the ugly stepchild. That they're not going to get the attention that they deserve. They're not going to get the funding that they deserve. They're not going to get that integration with pedestrians and bicycles that is absolutely critical. I also think that as a climate activist, that it is very important that we start to put more emphasis on Ripta, on public transportation. We have to use fewer cars in Rhode Island. We have to, get ready for the end of gasoline. We have to, figure out the mobility issues that people who are no longer driving have. And to put that all in one agency, the mass transit and the transit and the cars, I think is going to be problematic. And so even just if you don't do it as just merge them into an agency, but you just put one person as the chair, even though he's focused over here instead of on the transit, I think is going to be a big mistake. So I would ask that this committee not pass this bill, but actually focus more on funding RIPTA and funding the comprehensive transit plan.
Greg, thank you very much. Questions for Greg? Greg, thank you. Thank you. Next up, John Flaherty from Grow Smart, Rhode Island, in opposition. And Sierra Pettick? Sean. Sean, Sean, come on up. Oh, Sean Sierra Pettick? No? Okay. How about Cedric Yu? There we go. John, welcome. Oh, ask you keep your comments 2 to 3 minutes would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity, is this both the 991 and the sub-A together, or just the 991?
Just the sub-A.
Sub-A.
So yeah, the bill that we have before us, the 991 as existed, doesn't exist any longer.
Okay.
It's the sub-A, which just changes the board structure to 9,
Right.
quorum to 5, and the DOT director as the chair of the board.
Thank you very much.
But so the board still exists.
Members of the committee, my name is John Flaherty. I work for Grow Smart, Rhode Island. And on behalf of Grow Smart, I'm here to oppose Senate Bill 991. With all due respect, we view these bills as a solution in search of a problem. In our opinion, RIPTA is not broken, but it is severely underfunded. And we believe that with the General Assembly's support, the opportunity exists right now for RIPTA to leverage transit investments to strengthen Rhode Island's economy, make significant gains in meeting our Act on Climate targets, revitalize neighborhoods and downtowns, and save Rhode Islanders thousands of dollars in transportation costs. I attended the oversight hearings on March 6th, and I came away feeling that there was really no evidence to support making this change. In fact, what I gleaned from listening to the testimony was that RIPTA actually outperforms their peer agencies in just about every metric of performance. So what we know is this. We know that RIPTA does outperform its peer agencies in almost all performance metrics. We know that Rhode Island funds public transportation at a significantly lower rate per capita than any other state in our region, the urbanized states, woefully low. And thanks to RIPTA, we do have a publicly vetted and adopted vision for the future of transit. And I wish that the bills that we were talking about is a bill to address the forthcoming fiscal cliff, because that's the thing that's going to determine whether transit succeeds or not. But I thank you for your time and for your public service.
John, thank you very much. Questions for John? Senator Zurier.
What is your view of corporate governance currently within RIPTA? Do you think that the board is exercising the right level of governance and oversight with regard to the actions by management?
That's a good question. I think that the board has performed its function as an oversight for the agency. The one thing that I'll say that we appreciate about RIPTA as an agency is that they do have board meetings every month, and every board meeting has the opportunity to hear public comment. And so we do appear frequently, we ask questions, and we share our views. I know that the board is taking a greater interest, and they're becoming more proactive than, say, they have been in the past. This work that they were doing around developing a resolution to send to you all and to the governor is an example of that.
Just a quick follow-up.
So do you think that if a chair of the board was misbehaving, that the RIPTA board would have the opportunity to serve as a check on misconduct by the board chair?
Certainly. You got to, I mean, you have currently a 7-member board, and, so there's opportunities for the board to raise concerns about everybody, including the board chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cedric, welcome back to Senate Finance. I think you testified at the advice to consent hearing for Director Alvidi, didn't you?
Yes. So,
If you try and find your comments 2 to 3 minutes, it would be appreciated.
okay. Good evening, and thank you for the recognition. My name is Cedric Yee. I am a 14-year-old high school student, and I live in Providence, and I'm represented by Senator Samsorio. I'm opposed to Bill S. 991 Sub A, which I believe is an unnecessary distraction to the real transit issues faced in our state. So first of all, in the limited role that RIDOT has held over public transportation so far, the needs of riders have been put very far down. Folks, as mentioned, they value engineered indoor passenger amenities out of the Pawtucket Central Falls Transportation Center, which is now being built as a separate project by Ripta, and they also proposed the destruction of Ripta's main transportation center, Kennedy Plaza, 3 separate times, including the extremely controversial multi-hub proposal that was opposed by riders statewide and the Providence City Council. In addition, as an existing RIPTA board member, the director of RIDOT, Mr. Alvidi, has actually held back RIPTA's cooperation with this legislative body, having a major role in killing the proposed resolution to work with the state legislature to fully fund the fiscal cliff. Putting RIDOT in a high position at RIPTA is likely to marginalize the needs of riders of transit with virtually no benefit. I believe that this, and many others in this room today, believe that this bill is a distraction to what should be the focus of the state legislature, which is resolving the fiscal cliff and implementing the transit master plan. As you know, when federal COVID transit aid runs out next year, RIPTA's looming fiscal cliff, which is a problem actually faced by transit agencies nationwide, will result in catastrophic service cuts across the state, including a complete loss of service to the towns of Burrillville, Gloucester, Foster, Scituate, West Greenwich, Richmond, Hopkinton, Tiverton, and Westerly. And a sustainable funding source to resolve RIPTA's fiscal cliff must be immediately identified and allocated to avoid comedy. And it's an urgent issue that must be addressed immediately, and it's a shame that we're discussing this instead of how to fully fund RIPTA. At the same time, RIPTA's Transit Master Plan, which was, despite approval by the state legislature in 2020, has sat on a shelf ever since with no funding for implementation. With the TMP, which would increase transit ridership by an astounding 60%, would bring astounding benefits to increasing mobility, social justice, economic strength, and advancing climate goals across the state, including meeting 80% of the Act on Climate's VMT reduction goals alone. Smaller funding sources for the TMP are actually on the table right now, such as Senate Bill S59, which would be a tax on rideshare companies, the company could not be passed on to drivers or riders, which would give revenue to the TMP, as well as the increased registration fees for heavier vehicles as outlined as part of Bill S800. As outlined in RIPTA's TMP funding plan, the state legislature should also begin to evaluate a long-term primary source for funding it, such as a slight increase in property taxes, income taxes, sales tax, or vehicular tolling. Improving public transportation and alternative mobility in our state is a necessary step we must take to ensure equitable access and opportunity and advance economic, social, and environmental justice in Rhode Island. I recognize and applaud the attempt to improve public transportation in our state, but this is not the right solution. I, along with the dozens of advocates in this room today, hope you can work with us in making our state a better one to live, work, and play by bringing our transportation system into the 21st century. This starts with opposing Bill S991, but it continues with fully funding Ripta and implementing the Transit Master Plan. The Rhode Island we build today is the Rhode Island that my generation will inherit tomorrow, and we want it to be a Rhode Island that is sustainable, equitable, flourishing, and high quality for everyone, no matter how we choose to get around. Thank you for your time, and I'm excited to see your leadership for 21st century Rhode Island.
Cedric, thank you very much. Any comments or questions for Cedric? Senator Zurrier?
Thank you, Cedric, for coming back. You have the longest time horizon of any of the people who have testified before us, and it's a very important perspective, and I'm grateful you brought it to us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the last two to come up will be Patricia Raub, Rhode Island Transit Riders, if she's here. Okay. David Mann, certainly last but not least. Not on 991. This is the.
It was a sub-A and sub-A.
Okay. Thank you.
Be glad there's not 24 people or a dozen and a half people coming up, because we had to leave.
If you can please keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, I'd appreciate it.
Hi, my name is David Mann. Thank you all so much for being here tonight to hear this bill. I'm here to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 991, Sub A. I'm a former bus driver, a former transit supervisor, and I currently work for AS220. We're an organization that has about 50 artists in residence, most of whom don't own cars and use the bus to get where they need to go, as well as a youth program that has about 300 members, almost all of whom rely on public transit to come to visit our spaces. I just want to start by saying, our goal here, whenever we're talking about RIPTA, we should be talking about how do we get fantastic public transit in this state. I think we can all agree that that's something we all want. And I just want to speak as my experience as a bus rider and as a former bus driver. What does that feel like? What does great public transit feel like? It means you never have to wonder whether the bus is going to get you where you need to go. You just walk out to the bus stop and you get where you're going in a reasonable amount of time. It should be simple and easy. That means several things. It means we need frequent transit, we need a complete transit network, and we need late night and early morning hours of service. All of that requires more buses, more drivers, more service, and the bottom line is more funding, not changing a leadership structure as we're discussing in this bill. And I just want to reiterate what a lot of folks have said tonight, is that we have the lowest per capita transit funding of any urbanized state in the Northeast. And that's really shameful. It's really sad. I feel it every time I ride the bus. I can tell that the headways are long. I can't often get home at night when I want to get home at night. And I really fundamentally don't think that installing the RIDOT director as the board chair of RIPTA will solve those problems. If we were talking about the original bill, Senate Bill 991, I don't believe that putting RIPTA completely under the governance of RIDOT would help solve those problems. So I really want to encourage you all, let's face those problems directly. Let's talk about RIPTA's fiscal cliff. Let's talk about how to fund fantastic transit in this state, and let's not get distracted by other issues that are going to prevent us from dealing with that. Thank you so much.
David, thank you very much. Randall, over to you. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am also opposed to the Sub-A, which is basically as bad as the original bill. RIPTA is the sector of our transportation system that is by far the most efficient for climate. Even a non-electric bus is a lot better for the climate in terms of pollution per passenger than an electric car. And electric buses, which RIPTA is acquiring, is even better. But if the RIDOT director is given the lead role at RIPTA, that will send a signal that the board should be deferring to him, and the RIDOT director is very much focused only on cars and trucks, not on buses. It will be a step backward for climate. It will lead to less development of the bus system, and might even be lead to a decrease in the bus system, because he's not going to fight for climate. I also think the idea of putting an executive over an executive is a very strange organizational decision. You can think of what happened in Delaware, the only other state that has a statewide transit system. They did try putting their transit, they had an independent authority, a quasi-public. They tried putting it under their Department of Transportation. It didn't work. They had to reverse the decision. So Ripta is actually very good at getting federal grants. Don't be misled into thinking that integrating it with RIDOT would lead to more efficiency in getting grants. Ripta is very good at that. I've always been impressed by that, probably better than RIDOT. This bill smacks of political interference, and I know firsthand from years working on transit that a lot of the worst and most conspicuous and ugly problems that have been seen with transit are due to political interference. If you want somebody who's going to hold the system accountable on the board, the best way to do that is to have a spot on the board for somebody with experience as a rider advocate. In current statute, it says my organization, Rhode Island Transit Riders, should be consulted on board appointments. Our input has always been ignored. If we had a rider advocate on there, it would do a good job of holding people accountable. Just adding another...
Randall, if you can please keep your comments to the body of the language, not who else should be on the board.
Okay, but keeping it to the body of the language, just adding one more spot on the board or just changing who's the chair of the board is not going to promote accountability. I did just try to say what would. And I will also want to say that this, like other people, what really needs help what really is needed to help the transit system is stable funding and better funding. There's certainly things that the system could be done better, but this bill, any transit advocate and anyone who's experienced transit would tell you it's a step backwards. Thank you.
Randall, thank you very much. Next, we'll move over to Nick DiCristofaro from Ripta Local 618 in support. And we also have Merrill Simpson from Bike Newport. Come on up, Merrill. In opposition. Nick, welcome to Senate Finance. And if I can ask you, please keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, it would be appreciated.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be heard today. My name is Nick DiCristofaro, President and Business Agent of Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 618, 618A, representing the hard-working professional employees at Ripta. As the President of the ATU Local 618, I want to thank the members of the Senate for hearing our concerns about Ripta losing its independence as an agency. As a union, we think that Ripta can best serve the riding public by maintaining its independence and by hearing directly from the transit workers who perform the vital work. To ensure that transit workers have a voice on the Ripta board, we propose that the legislation reserve a seat for the union representing would allow Local 618 to work hand in hand with the board and the director of DOT as its chairman to ensure the best possible public transit system in the country. This being said, we would be in favor of the bill S0991-A. Thank you for allowing us to voice our thoughts and concerns. Now, I don't know if I am confused. I mean, I've been at Ripta for over 45 years, and we've always done great work. We've always been recognized as a leader in the country, and including Canada. We all have times together, so we go over what we have. What I find lately is the only thing that we have trouble with at Ripta is communication. I think that Ripta is always, and we always advocated for funding for Ripta. We've always done well. Funding, of course, the more the better. I don't think public transit in our state is something not to look at. I mean, it's a necessity. We all need public transit. We're a leader. All we need is more communication and more working together from labor end and directors of the board. Now, if Mr. Alvidi comes in and tries to change that, I think that will be problematic. But if it just gives us more a check and balance between the riders and the workers and also management team, I would think that's a great thing. But I agree with most of the people that spoke before me, even if they do oppose it, but they're not, I don't know what they're opposing. Most of what I heard is funding. Funding, I believe, is there, and it will be coming as long as we work together going forward.
Nick, thank you. Questions for Nick? Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you. Next up is, where'd he go? Mike Newport.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Merrill Simpson. Merrill,
My name is Merrill Sampson. I'm the communications manager at Bike Newport. I'm here to oppose Senate Bill 991 Sub A. A lot has already been spoken here today, and it's going to be pretty redundant, but RIPTA doesn't need this type of oversight, this change in oversight, this change in management structure. What RIPTA needs is proper funding. And I think this conversation is taking away from the fact that RIPTA is the backbone of this state. It provides a lot of our workers to get around the state, and they are complaining about the issues that they're having, and a lot of these issues can be fixed by proper funding. And at Bike Newport, we're big supporters of RIPTA because, you know, our transit system needs to be a multimodal type of transit system. People need to be riding bikes to bus stops that are safe and covered, and getting on buses and getting off buses and traveling on safe, protected bike and pedestrian walkways. And we don't have a solid enough core at RIPTA to build out that multimodal system. And I think as we continue to focus on something that is more of a bureaucratic and management structure and not, you know, how we can make sure that this system is funded properly, then we lose sight of this bigger picture of where Rhode Island can be a pro-transit space. We have the opportunities to be one of the fully completed bike networks here in the country, and could again assist RIPTA and its issues that it's having. And I believe, again, this is all taking away from the conversation of RIPTA needing funding. And, you know, we at Bike Newport strongly oppose this bill, and we hope that the Senate committee can come together and think about a bill that would, you know, increase funding for RIPTA and, you know, build out that network. And us in the Bicycle Coalition and the Pedestrian Bicycle Coalition will work together with RIPTA to make that a feasible opportunity. Thank you for your time.
Merrill, thank you very much. Questions for Merrill? Merrill, thanks for coming from Newport. Appreciate it. Next up, we have, is Lisa Birkin here from Providence Streets Coalition? And Dylan Giles from Pawtucket? And I think the last two after that would be, nope, I think that person, Sean's not here. Diane Ginny? She's not here either, okay. So Dylan, no, sorry, Lisa, you're first. Liza, you're first.
Oh, I'm first.
Liza's first.
Okay. Hello. My name is Liza Birkin. I'm the lead organizer of the Providence Streets Coalition. We're an alliance of more than 42 organizations that support safer streets, more transportation choices, and mobility justice in Providence and beyond. So this year, amid a historic national transit funding crisis and an ever-escalating climate crisis that is, in Rhode Island, 40% fueled by transportation emissions, we've spent a lot of our time squabbling over directorships of these agencies. And it's like pretty embarrassing. We have really big problems to contend with, and all we're talking about is who's in charge. Today's Boston Globe featured a story about a new report released at the International Transportation Forum, an annual gathering of transportation leaders from all over the world. And in this report, the researchers contributing to this report were urging governments to improve public transit, walking and biking, car sharing, and electrify everything as quickly as possible. So like, why aren't we here discussing that? Ripta's data tells us that implementing the Transit Master Plan would achieve 80% of the Act on Climate vehicle miles reduction goals. If we're talking about elevating somebody to the Ripta board or folding Ripta under a different organization, why is it not the EC4? Why aren't we talking about Terry Gray being on the Ripta board? We need to deeply embed public transit with our climate strategy in this state, here and everywhere. Let me be clear. The current CEO of Ripta absolutely needs to be a more forceful advocate for funding. He needs to be more accountable to the board. I take into consideration deeply I go to a lot of Ripta board meetings. I hear these complaints. I think they're very real, and I agree. But that is not, but I really just lament the fact that we're here talking about that and not the bigger issues. There's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to our leaders. The Director of Transportation needs to stop being such a brick wall when it comes to community engagement. That is the main reason that folks are here opposing this bill tonight, is because of how resistant he has been to community engagement in the past. So yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement from our leaders, but they are our leaders for 2 and 4 more years respectively, so we all just gotta get over it. And please, please move on beyond this bickering and on to the job of saving our transit system.
Why is it? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we do have, by the way, Dylan, you're almost the last, but Patrick Crowley, I missed. He will be the last. So Dylan Giles, please keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes.
My name is Dylan Giles. I'm a resident of Pawtucket, and I rely on Ripta as well as biking and walking to get where I need to go. Ripta is a transit system that has so much unfulfilled potential, but underfunding and undervaluing the system has failed riders like me, not to mention many others who rely on the system not by choice, but by circumstance. Ripta and its riders deserve a leader with robust experience who can steer a modern transit agency and work aggressively to find and secure both operational and capital funding. I'm opposing Sub A because Director Alvidi and RIDOT have demonstrated they're wholly unqualified to be that type of leader. Director Alvidi has proven he's incapable of seeing transit as the valuable public good that it is, and has led an agency dedicated to making sure the only efficient means of mobility in the state is to drive a private vehicle. Under Director Alvidi, it has become clear RIDOT's primary focus is about highways, and the department is now deeply focused on expanding highway capacity. Transit would only be a secondary priority. It is unreasonable that RIDOT should be a primary spokesperson and advocate for transit. The conversation that we should be having, as many have mentioned, is how to address the massive funding, fiscal cliff that Ripta is facing, and more broadly, how to fund the Transit Master Plan and bring high-quality transit service to Rhode Island. Instead, we're stuck in a power struggle, and in the middle are the Rhode Islanders who rely on Ripta to get to work, school, or services. As we fall further behind on our climate goals, we need leadership at the executive, board, and legislative level that will work cooperatively to advocate for robust service frequency, understanding transit's critical role in reducing emissions, improving the environment, and addressing social inequalities. And I'll echo what John Flaherty said, that we have a solution in search of a problem. And the real problem is the lack of collaboration of leadership on all levels to adequately fund Ripta, failing riders at every turn and putting the entire system in jeopardy.
Dylan, thank you very much. Thank you. Questions or comments for Dylan or Eliza? Thank you. Now, certainly last but not least, Patrick Crowley, Rhode Island AFL-CIO, in support. And Patrick, if you can keep your comments to 2 or 3 minutes, it would be appreciated.
Yes, of course, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. My name is Patrick Crowley. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, and on behalf of our membership, we are in support of the legislation for a number of reasons. One, I think the accountability level changes with the way this proposal is written. The Director of Department of Transportation, whether it is the incumbent or a future occupant of that seat, has to, needs to be approved with advice and consent of the Senate after a nomination from the governor. I think that provides a different level of oversight than currently exists, where the current CEO is only hired by the board. So I think that's one way that we can make sure that your voices and the people that you represent's voices are contained in this. Two, I think expanding the board by one more person makes sure that we don't end up with a tie. Right now, there's 8 people on the board. The DOT director is an ex officio member, which means that according to our rules, he has a vote. So all this would do is make sure that that person has a vote and is the chairperson. The current law has the fact that the board itself elects its chairperson. And I think that by making sure that that chairperson is designated by statute as someone who has been approved by advice and consent will improve oversight. Finally, I think I would like to echo my brother Nick DeCristofaro's point that if this bill does pass, that in the future we look at the opportunity to put a Ripta driver or member of ATU Local 618 as an official member of the Board of Directors, because I think their insight is a valuable asset to the board. I'll stop there and answer any questions.
Patrick, thank you very much. Questions or comments for Patrick? Patrick, I think that was an excellent comment that you made. Thank you very much. Seeing no more testimony for this bill, Senator Chacon? Motion made by Senator Chacon for passage, seconded by Senator Murray, Senator Figelak, Senator Brito. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? This will move to the floor. Thank you very much.